There's been so many developments in Russia, and then
Right.
just after the Syrian crisis, and it just seems like people kind of forgot about Gaza and Palestine, but one people that haven't forgotten about it are the Houthis. The Yemenis are still fighting strong. I saw they struck Tel Aviv with a ballistic missile not long ago. But also, I saw that a U.S. Navy F-18 jet was shot down over the Red Sea. Did you see this?
Yeah, I did.
And so the Yemenis are claiming that they shot it down, and then the U.S. Navy says it was friendly fire, that they shot down their own plane. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and well, initially I heard that it was reported as friendly fire, but then I think it was just this morning I saw that the Houthis were claiming that they had shot it down. I guess it's, maybe the Houthis said that right out, but the fact is I didn't see the report now until like 2 days after the initial report. So it kind of makes me think that it was in fact a friendly fire incident, and then later the Houthis decided to claim credit for it. It's certainly not impossible that the Houthis could do something like that, because if they have missiles that could strike Tel Aviv, and they clearly, Israel's air defense system was completely unaffected against that. In fact, you can watch a video of these, missiles coming up from the ground, and then 3 seconds later, a large missile comes down from the sky and clearly hits the ground and causes a terrific explosion. They could do nothing to stop it. So if they can do that, it certainly seems possible that they could bring down an F-18. I know we talked earlier about the fact that over the years, over the last few decades, the technological trends have been in favor of missiles over aircraft. It used to be that the aircraft could not easily evade, but could, with a skillful pilot could generally evade a missile that was fired at it. And that's just no longer true. So it's certainly believable that the Houthis have that capability. I don't know, I'm not convinced that they succeeded in this particular instance, but if somewhere down the road, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're able to shoot down some American or Israeli aircraft.
Have we seen the THAAD system in use? Because, we were talking about those ballistic missiles that Yemen shot and they hit Tel Aviv recently. And you said you saw interceptors coming up and, then the ballistic missile just comes down. But the THAAD is supposed to be designed for these, right? This was a ballistic missile, right, that Yemen shot. So the THAAD is a high altitude anti-ballistic missile system. Why haven't we seen it? Why aren't they using it?
I don't know if this was considered high altitude or not. But it shows that the limitations of the THAAD. I was talking about the problem. It's a very, it's very good at taking out a certain kind of missile, and that's the high altitude ballistic missile. Or reasonably good, at least. I don't know if it's very good, but it's reasonably effective in that regard. But its application is very, very limited. So I don't know if this was actually the one that struck Tel Aviv, if that missile actually qualified as a high altitude ballistic missile.
So is it basically what Iran used on its big volley against
I guess
Israel?
At least some of those missiles probably were high altitude, ballistic missiles. Of course, Iran is firing from, even farther away.
So Yemen is able to strike Israel with these missiles. Have they been striking U.S. ships? We heard about one aircraft carrier that was sent to San Diego, supposedly for repairs. Rumors that it was hit by Yemeni missiles or drones.
Yeah, that's a rumor. Yeah, we don't know.
Right. So do you know if the Houthis are targeting these vessels? I mean, what's this battle? It sounds like we're just sitting there on the coast trying to shoot down, just wasting money, basically throwing money down, shooting down these cheap drones and missiles. I've
heard very little, over the last couple of months, but that may just actually be a sign of Houthi success, meaning that they've established their deterrence in the Red Sea, deterrence to commercial shipping. That's really their main purpose. Israeli-linked commercial shipping, that is. And so, up until like a couple months ago, you still get some foolhardy captain thinking you could get through. And, they kept on hitting these ships and doing serious damage to them. And I think their owner said, don't even try. So in that sense, I haven't heard anything to contradict this. That would be the absence or of news stories about struck commercial vessels, may be a sign of Houthi victory, at least for the present. I know, like, when the most recent one was hit, I was thinking, how could this person be so stupid? Does he know where he is? But, I guess sometimes it takes a while to establish deterrence. And over the last several days, there have been a rather intensive bombardment of Sana'a, that's the capital of Yemen. I think carried out both by the Americans and the Israelis. And I don't know, they're claiming that they're striking against, missile launching or missile fabricating sites in Sana'a. And who knows? Maybe they've hit some of those, maybe not. So far, the Americans have been bombing Yemen for nearly a year now, and it hasn't slowed them down. Maybe eventually occasionally they are going to hit some targets that do hurt their missile effort. But I think, again, Yemen is actually a fairly large country with a lot of hills and mountains, and they're not stupid. They're not going to put these missiles in places where they're highly vulnerable.
Right.
So, even though if we do take out some launchers, some facilities, I'm sure that their missile launching capabilities will remain.
It feels like the Houthis are the only currently active member of the Axis of Resistance now.
Yeah.
Are you hearing anything from Hezbollah or Iran, or it's just kind of gone silent?
Right. Again, we're waiting for the retaliation that was promised by Iran, the counterstrike. And that was made, I think, like 6-7 weeks ago now. I mean,
it's been almost 2 months, right?
Yeah, I think almost 2 months. Now, the first one did take 2 months before it was carried out. Now, there could be different reasons for this. It seems like, again, they made it clear enough that they were going to do it. If they don't do it, then it is a major loss of face and a loss of deterrence. We have to say that. Now, why are they taking so much time? There are different possibilities. One is that they may just want to slow down the pace of these strikes and counterstrikes. They don't want to go up the escalation ladder too fast. They don't want a war. They know the Israelis do want a war. At the same time, they're forced to establish some kind of deterrence by responding, so they're maybe compromising by just doing it slowly. That's a possibility. Another possibility is actually something that Professor Morandi pointed out, and it's that the Iranians now realize that there's the next strike could have a much greater American participation than the last one. Now, the Americans had to have been involved in the last strike because they provide the air refueling. And so they clearly were involved. They participated. But they didn't fire their own missiles or send their own aircraft to the borders of Iran. But this time it might be different. And so the Iranians may have just, to guard against that, the probable American participation, they feel like they need to beef up their air defense forces even more. And so possibly they're just, they're installing new equipment, maybe importing more from Russia. Who knows? These are all possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, even if the U.S. tries to carry out an attack, well, we've talked about this before, what kind of attack could they carry out? It would have to be airborne, right? From their aircraft carriers, their bases in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do that, then then Iran would hit those air bases in the Navy, right? The
well,
US
they might.
fleet.
I mean, that's the thing, that the U.S. has to take that into account. That they know that those bases, especially the ones in Iraq, but I think all bases throughout the the Middle East they're all vulnerable to Iranian attack. And an
Right.
aircraft carrier that's at all close to Iran is also vulnerable to it.
Right. I mean, Iran would have 100% justification to hit those bases or the aircraft carriers where this attack was carried out. It's like, hey, you attacked us with this, then we have the right to hit it, right? I don't think the rest of the world wouldn't be able to say like, hey, you can't do that, Iran. But then if Iran does that, then it's
the West would.
The West is, but the West is a paper tiger now. That's the thing. It's like that's what's being exposed. Right. So I mean, if we do that, then if this happens, if the U.S. participates heavily in our own pilots, for example, or would you think our own pilots would be flying for this attack? And carrying out, like, what do you mean that there'll be considerable U.S. Assistance involvement?
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. Another possibility is that like a number of Tomahawk cruise missiles are launched from U.S. ships.
Would that mean that the U.S. is now at war with Iran?
Yeah, that's the danger, right? Yeah, that's the foolishness. But it's just that, again, we have a lot of warmongers in the incoming Trump administration. And the kind of the most hot-headed of those have a special hatred for Iran. And unfortunately, it's true of Trump himself. That's always been true of him. I remember that back in 2016. He made a lot of good statements about foreign policy. In general, his instincts seem to be very sound, but he just always had this irrational fear or hatred of Iran. And of course, he was responsible. He ordered the Soleimani assassination. So he could, but then he held off, even though people like John Bolton were urging him to actually bomb Iran. He chose not to. So, again, you never know with Trump, but he just might, he just might order some kind of attack. That's the rumors now, is that they're working on some sort of attack that are actually directed at Iranian nuclear facilities, which seems to me just real stupid. If anything that I've heard is true about the Iranians, is that they understand that that's what the Americans and the Israelis want to do. They want to strike these nuclear facilities. They've understood it for better than 20 years, and they've been preparing for it. So they're not out there in the open where they could be hit. They're deep underground. And so I don't know. It would be a stupid attack if, in fact, maybe it's something that Trump ordered, and now he may be slowly learning that it's just not feasible.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you told me before that the West and much of the Western establishment, at least, always views Russia as just this weak, it's a gas station operating, pretending to be a country kind of thing. And that was the perception. And because of that, that's kind of one of the reasons we're in the mess we are now. But we are, hopefully, they are beginning to learn that, hey, Russia is a real adversary, probably more than a pure rival at this point. They are superior. But do you think that there's any respect from the West of the capabilities of the Iranians, or do they view this as just like, oh, this is just going to be Iraq and Afghanistan all over again? This will be a cakewalk, do they have some reality?
Among the politicians, it just seems like, again, these seem to be the least informed people of all, and they probably think that Iran would be a pushover, and they imagine them as being, sort of just a larger Iraq. I'm sure that their military people have told them no, and then there are different times when I think clearly, like the Bush administration actually wanted to attack Iran, but it was the intelligence community that kind of pulled the rug from under the effort, that said, he wanted the excuse, the pretext of Iranian nuclear weapons program, and they said no, they don't have one. I think it was, but I think that was partly, they spoke the truth then, because probably they also knew that it just wasn't feasible, that Iran was not Iraq. Iran was going to be a very tough nut to crack. And I think that's what these administrations have been told again and again. And so there are times when we come right close to the edge of war with Iran, but then we always step back. And I think it's because, these presidents, from George W. Bush up to Trump, have been told when they come close to like pressing the button, they've been told this in no uncertain terms, this is going to be a huge mess. This is not going to be easy. We're going to lose a lot of our own guys and our bases, and they stop and think, this is not going to help my reelection chances or my, my approval ratings, and they step back. And maybe that's what's going to happen again.
Well, not if Netanyahu can help it. I mean,
Netanyahu is obviously working hard to prevent it.
You're right. Okay, well, one last question before we end is that there's been a lot of talk and apparent pressure from Trump to get a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel. And there's rumors and talk saying that, that might actually happen. Do you believe that's the case, that we will see a real ceasefire deal? And if we do, how does that change everything between the axis of resistance and Israel?
Yeah, well, it's possible. Again, the fall of Assad, I think, changes an awful lot in the Middle East. And it may have affected Hamas calculations, and it certainly is affecting Hezbollah calculations. And so it may be that Hamas has decided they just have to go for one. Now, on the other hand, I think I just heard yesterday that Netanyahu just said that, he would never go for it. Basically, he's done this, I think, again and again, where he seems to be playing along with the negotiations. I think he has to show, at least go through the motions of it for the sake of, the hostage supporters within Israel and also for the Western powers. He's got to pretend that he's interested in negotiations. But when push comes to shove, he always makes it clear that he has no interest in a negotiated settlement. And so I think it's quite possible that's what's going to happen again. I can't be sure. He may just decide that, okay, he's got enough. Maybe he's just going to take northern Gaza. That's basically seems to be his plan at the present. And just let them, let the rest of Gaza suffer. They'll continue to make their lives miserable as they can very easily, even without bombing them, and with the hope of maybe just causing them all to flee to Egypt or something. He could do something like that. But I think again yesterday he basically outright said that we're not doing that.
Really? Yeah. I mean, that Netanyahu was probably excited when he saw that tweet from Trump saying that, there will be hell to pay or something like this if the hostages aren't released by the time he's in office, that he's going to just unleash hell. Yeah. And then was like, perfect. We definitely don't want to get the hostages back because that's what we want. We want the U.S. to unleash hell on the Middle East. That's always what they want. That's been his plan forever.
No, it's clear. Yeah, that's not some kind of conspiracy theory. I mean, it's clear from going back. That's just been a well-established pattern of Israeli behavior. It's just to always actually kind of cut off the avenues for peaceful settlements, for negotiations, by assassinating negotiators, by attacking the more moderate factions within Palestine, and by building up the more radical factions. And all with the purpose of actually engendering military conflict, which they feel confident they can win. Because, again, they want a military solution. And a military solution, of course, by that I mean an Israeli military victory.
What a scary world we live in, Dad, with some real scary, evil people. I feel like I was a lot happier before we started having this conversation.
I'm sorry.
Before I started learning about all these things, I should have just stuck with video games and beer or something. And
like most other American in your age.
Yeah,
like a lot of your friends.
Netflix and don't worry about what's happening. The more that I go down these rabbit holes, there's just so many things to explore and discover and uncover. It's just, okay. Well, let's just end it there.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good day, Dad.